Sony Xperia 1 will either be the best or the worst camera phone you test depending on what kind of thing you look for on your smartphone, and that duality really goes to the core of the mobile. Hi and welcome to Techradar. I'm tech reviewer Tom Bedford here with our video review of the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV. This is, as the name would suggest, the 4th gen version of Sony's line of premium Android phones designed for creatives and people that enjoy their movies and games. First thing we need to talk about straight away is the price of the phone. Costing $1,600 in the US and $1,300 in the UK, it's incredibly expensive. In fact, when comparing like-for-like storage options, it's more expensive than the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra and iPhone 13 Pro Max, and, interestingly, the Mark III Xperia. So when I'm talking about the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV, just remember this is one of the most expensive non-folding phones you can buy right now. So let's look at what you can get for that price. Let's start at the best bit, the cameras. Sony uses the same tech for these as it does its own alpha cameras, and it's always working on new ways to keep its Xperias competitive. This year, as well as the same 12 megapixel main and ultra-wide cameras we've seen before, it's got a 12 megapixel sensor paired with a moving lens for continuous optical zoom. This means that, however much you zoom between 3.5 times and 5.2 times, the camera will use optical zoom without needing to use digital zoom or cropping, which doesn't always look great. In my testing, I found this awesome for taking lovely looking long distance snaps without losing any quality and while getting some lovely depth. Another smaller update is to the front camera. It's now 12 megapixel up from 10, which allows for 4K video recording at up to 120 frames per second. Actually, that's another big update for the phone all round. Now all 3 rear and 1 front facing cameras do that. Sony positions its phones as great for video recording with a Cinema Pro app that resembles using a video camera for shooting movies, and the ability to record 4K 120 frames per second on all the rear cameras is really useful.
What you're looking at right now is 4K footage shot on the front-facing camera.
And this is 4K shot on the rear-facing camera to give you a sense of what it looks like in comparison. It's in the Photography Pro mode that some issues might arise though. This is what I was talking about in the introduction when I said some people might hate this phone. Sony's camera app is presented like a traditional camera with an exposure mode carousel at the top, a physical shutter button at the side, and no AI smarts like Samsung or Apple offer. That's because this phone is designed for professional photographers who want nice, clean pictures they can edit themselves later, though if you don't fall into that target audience, you might find the phone horrible to use. If you're technically minded or are willing to put in the time, the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV could be a great option for you. It just misses that ease of use that Samsung or iPhone rivals have. Let's move on to another great area, the display. Sony is, so far, the only manufacturer making phones with 4K displays. The Mark IV has the same screen as its predecessor, so it's a 6.5-inch 4K 120Hz panel. The one improvement here is that it's 50% brighter than the last one, though honestly it's still not enough. I really struggled to see the screen in direct sunlight. I should point out that the screen isn't always at 4K though, it only hits that when you're looking at something that is in 4K, but honestly that's fine to me. I really enjoyed watching films using the built-in Sony Bravia streaming app, well apart from Morbius which is on there, but that's not really the phone's fault. Design-wise, this is again basically the same device you've seen before. It's quite an angular and awkward device, not exactly comfortable to hold, especially because of its long and thin build. I've got one big criticism though, that's the fingerprint scanner, which is really awkward to use. It only worked about half the time we tried it to, it kept ignoring us. Making up for that issue is the useful physical shutter button, which makes photography much easier, no more blocking the screen with your hand as you try to press the on-screen version. You can slightly depress it to focus too, which I used all the time, taking away the annoyance of relying on autofocus or the on-screen manual focusing. Another issue I've seen loads of people raise that the One Mark IV and some older Sony Xperia ones have is that it's quick to overheat, and I've got to say that's definitely something I felt too. It's because of the chipset. The Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 here is powerful, but it gets hot incredibly quickly, so even though it was great for gaming, I could only last about a round on some popular games, or maybe two, before I had to put the device down. It was even worse for video recording. I wasn't able to do that much 4K video without having to let the device cool down between takes. I don't see Sony ditching the top-end Snapdragon for future Xperia, so it should really consider some internal cooling systems to avoid this issue in the future. Let's move on from a persistent Xperia problem to a persistent Xperia accomplishment, and that's battery life. So many flagships we test have rubbish battery lives, but with its 5000 mAh battery, I absolutely didn't find that for the Xperia One Mark IV. It breezed through a day of battery life, even when I used it loads to the screen on time of at least 7 hours, and it took constant 4K video recording to threaten that battery life. The phone runs stock Android 12 as a software, which is pretty clean, but Sony has loaded it up with its own apps for enterprising types. I've mentioned Photography Pro, which is the equivalent of the camera app, and Cinema Pro, which is for top-end film shooting. There's also Video Pro, which sits as a more bare-bones version of Cinema Pro, Music Pro, which lets you record and mix music using the built-in speaker, a game streaming mode for mobile games, Sony Bravia for streaming movies, Tidal, and Amazon Shopping, Booking.com, and LinkedIn. Okay, admittedly those last three are bloatware, but other than them, I'm really happy with these baked-in apps. Overall, they're really useful for people that like making content or enjoying it, and the handset offers loads of features that you don't get on most other smartphones. That, for some people, is enough to make the device justify the cost. If I was a professional photographer or videographer, I could really see this phone being a tempting buy. But if you're just looking for a cool phone to play games on or scroll through social media, you really don't need to be paying this much and getting all these top-end features. And even if you do want to take great pictures or videos but aren't technically minded, Samsung and Apple phones might be better off for you. So this isn't really a phone for everybody, but Sony knows that, is clearly marketing this for professionals, and if you think that's you, you should really look into this phone. So, do you think that's you? Do you think the Sony Xperia One Mark IV appeals to you? Are you interested in buying it? Maybe you already have. I want to know all your thoughts on the phone, so drop a comment down below and let me know what you think. Also, you can head over to techradar.com to find my full written review with loads of camera samples as well as loads of other fun features we've got on the phone. So subscribe to the channel and I'll see you on the next TechRadar video.